Today, we're diving into an idea that might just change how you see our politics. What if the Constitution doesn't always have one single right answer for every problem? And what if, in those moments, our freedom actually depends on a forgotten virtue the founders absolutely prized, prudence?
So let's just jump right in with a foundational question. When we're facing a tough national issue, do we tend to treat the Constitution like it's some kind of supercomputer? Like if we just punch in the right code, it's going to spit out the one single correct answer?
Well, here's the reality, and it can be a little surprising at first. The Constitution isn't a rigid instruction manual. It doesn't have a pre-approved solution for every single thing that comes up. Instead, it often creates a space, kind of like a playing field, where multiple, very different approaches can all be perfectly legal.
Okay, so if the law allows for a few different choices, how do we pick a good one? This is exactly where that virtue the founders talked about comes in. Prudence. Think of it as the civic wisdom to use good judgment and caution to choose the best path from all the legally available options. This gets us to a really crucial idea. We should see the Constitution less like a detailed blueprint for building a house and more like the property lines, the boundaries that keep us safe. And that flexibility? It was put there on purpose.
I mean, just think about the difference. A blueprint is totally rigid, right? It tells you exactly what to do step by step. But boundaries, they just show you the lines you can't cross, which leaves you a whole lot of freedom to operate within them. The founders deliberately gave us that room for judgment.
And this leads to what might be one of the most important distinctions any of us can make. Just because something is constitutional, that doesn't automatically mean it's wise. An action can be perfectly legal and at the exact same time be a truly terrible idea.
You can really see the two different mindsets here. The Constitution asks a legal question, a "can they do it" question. Is the government acting within its authority? But Prudence asks a whole series of wisdom questions. Should we do this? Is it really necessary? Is the solution proportional to the problem? What are the consequences we haven't thought of?
Now, what happens when we forget all this? Well, there are some real dangers. The moment we start insisting that our preferred policy is the only constitutionally correct one, we start to create a really toxic political environment.
This way of thinking kicks off a really dangerous downward spiral. First, any kind of compromise starts to look like corruption. Then, simple disagreement gets treated as if it's immoral. And the logical endpoint of all that is to centralize power to force everyone to think the same way, which, of course, is the path to authoritarianism. So, who is responsible for exercising prudence? Well, the good news is it's not just one person or group. The responsibility is spread out all through our system, from legislators and executives to judges. And most importantly, it includes us, the citizens, every time we vote or just participate in the culture. This distribution is actually a powerful safeguard for our liberty. So this brings us to the most important part, right? How do we practice this? As citizens in a free society, what is our role in making sure this virtue stays alive and well? Because, our whole system kind of depends on it. A prudent citizen, well, they practice a kind of disciplined self-government. They understand the huge difference between a policy they hate and a policy that's actually illegal. They can accept a lawful outcome even if they were on the losing side of the vote. And they work for change by trying to persuade people, not by panicking or acting like the sky is falling with every single disagreement. So, with that picture of a prudent citizen in our minds, maybe it's a good time to pause for a second and do some honest self-reflection. Let's just consider 3 questions that really get to the heart of our own civic maturity. First one, do I confuse what I want to happen with what the Constitution requires to happen? Do I sometimes talk about my opponent's ideas not just as unwise, but as if they're fundamentally illegitimate? All right, second question. Can I truly accept that other people might choose a different path and still be acting lawfully? Can I believe that people who disagree with me might also be operating in good faith, even if I think their idea is just awful? And finally, am I more willing to persuade than to coerce? When I get into a debate, is my first instinct to use reason and evidence to win someone over, or is it to just find a way to force my view on them? So here's your takeaway, a really practical plan to put this into action. Sometime this week, I want you to pick an issue where reasonable people disagree. Then, identify 2 different but still lawful approaches to it. After that, try to evaluate both of them using those prudence questions we talked about. And the final step, just practice discussing the issue without automatically assuming the other side is acting in bad faith.
Let's end with this final thought because it just captures the whole idea perfectly. The Constitution gives us room to breathe. Prudence teaches us how to use that room well. You see, liberty survives not because every single decision we make is perfect, but because we, the citizens, stay committed to lawful process and wise judgment. It really is up to all of us to use that freedom well.